20-30 seconds to join. I welcome you all to our community of practice on strengthening support for children with learning differences. Today is our third session on inclusive curriculum and assessment strategies. As people are coming in, I would like to request you all in the chat to please write your name, organization, the location from where you're joining us, and on an Elmo scale of 1 to 9, how are you feeling today? My colleague Mercy will also be dropping this image in the chat, but please do keep engaging with us there. As I see these 9 images, I do realize that Elmo looks fairly happy in all of them. So I hope that's how you all are feeling today as well. A few guidelines as we begin. This is a safe space to share your opinions and experiences. Please raise a hand to ask questions, use virtual reactions to engage. We'd love your full attention. If possible, please switch off from other tasks and notifications on your laptop for the duration of this meeting. And if you can, and if bandwidth allows, please do turn on your video. We would love to see your faces as we go along this presentation. Do engage with each other, ask questions freely, build on each other's ideas, appreciate and comment on your peers' chat or reactions. Please be open and do share your contact information if you wish to get in touch with anybody. Today, we are very grateful to be joined by our peers from CAST and Building Tomorrow. From CAST, we have Melissa Sanjeh, Senior Professional Learning Specialist on CAST Professional Learning Team, and Kyazze Edward, Inclusive Education Program Manager at Building Tomorrow. Today, we are going to learn about bringing in inclusivity for all learners in classrooms by the way of inclusive curriculum and assessment. In the next 90 minutes, we are going to get to know each other. For those of you who could join us in the previous sessions, we have definitely taken your feedback on wanting more time with your peers and having smaller group sessions. We completely understand that not everybody may be comfortable sharing in a smaller group, but that's okay. Please feel free to just listen in to your peers. You can learn something from them. You can share with them if you wish to. Post which I'm going to talk to you, for those of you who don't know GSF, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about GSF, the work that we are doing in learning differences and the reason why we are here today. After that, we are going to have a quick getting to know each other session where we will have peer learning with your peers, where you can learn about them, their org, and the challenges that they are facing in their journey of inclusive education. After that, I will request Melissa and Kyazze to talk about their work in CAST and Building Tomorrow. They are going to talk about the principles of UDL, how CAST will explain about the UDL framework and about the work that they are doing. And Building Tomorrow will build on that and tell you how they're actually implementing it within their classrooms and what are the different assessment strategies that they are using in their classroom while they're promoting inclusive education. After this, we will go into another quick peer learning session where you will again get to engage and learn and figure out how you can implement the things that you have learned today in the short term as well as the long term. We will come back and do a little bit of reflection on what is currently working and how it is that GSF and everybody on the call can support each other going further. At the end of which, we will launch a quick poll. As mentioned, please do take a few minutes to fill the poll as your feedback really helps us while we are designing these sessions as we go further. I'm going to begin by telling those of you who don't know about GSF a little bit about Global Schools Forum. We are a collaborative community and innovation accelerator and a partnership builder for non-state organizations working to improve education at scale for underserved children in low and middle income countries. Since we started in 2017, we have grown our community to 174 organizations spanning 71 countries, collectively running or supporting over 1.3 million schools and centers, and providing education to more than 133 million children. The organizations in GSF's community are standalone schools, a diverse set of school networks, and ECD centers, and organizations providing core support services to non-state schools and to government education systems. Now, why are we here today in this community of practice on learning differences? I would like to tell you a little bit about the project and what led to this community of practice. Some of you are working with children with learning differences, often referred to as learning disabilities. 9 in 10 children with disabilities under the age 5 live in low and middle income countries, yet many education systems in these contexts struggle to provide quality support. GSF, along with Oak Foundation, is doing a scoping study on learning differences. Our objectives are very simple and twofold. One, we want to identify the priorities, needs, challenges of education organizations such as yourselves in LMICs and understand the challenges that they face in supporting children with learning differences. And two, we want to explore how we can better support these organizations. Based on our scoping study, consultations, and focus group discussions, we listened to the community and came up with a 5-part community of practice on learning differences. We have already covered screening tools and early diagnosis tools. We spoke about teacher capacity building and classroom support for inclusive education in our last session. Today, with CAST and Building Tomorrow, we will be talking about inclusive curricula and adaptive assessment strategies. In the next 2 sessions, we will touch upon differentiated instruction and inclusive pedagogy, followed by engaging caregivers and communities to reduce stigma and support inclusive learning. After the session, I will be sharing with you the invite for our next sessions. In our first session on screening and diagnosis tools, we had Learning Differently and Dyslexia Organization Kenya, where we spoke about low-cost contextualized tools and learned about invisible disabilities. To quickly recap our second session on teacher capacity building, we spoke to Perkins India and Fana Ethiopia, where they told us about how teachers are the first line of support. And with the right support, they will be able to recognize, refer, and respond effectively for children to be diagnosed early. Inclusive teaching helps every child. A lot of focus was on how universal design for learning will give children more ways to engage, and CAST and Building Tomorrow will be developing on that further today. Finally, similar to what we also learned in diagnosis tools, co-created resources and community-based models always work better than one-size-fits-all approaches. And finally, one-off workshops aren't enough. Teachers need a structured follow-up. Just doing a small workshop or one-off training is not going to help make teachers ready for inclusive education. They need continued coaching, mentoring, and support. With that context, we are now going to go into the first peer learning session. I'm going to request Mercy to put us into groups of 4 or 5. If you could just share with your peer your name and organization, and in your respective contexts, when it comes to inclusive curriculum and assessments, what is currently working and where do you most often see barriers? We are going to put you in rooms for about 10 minutes. I would request you all to identify one representative who can come back and share. And I understand not all of you may be working in the specific context, but do engage and listen to your peers if you can. Mercy will be dropping in a link to the Google Doc where you can pick up the right room, your correct group number, and put in the information there from which you can come back and share. I'm going to take a second to pause and just ask if there are any questions. I'm also just looking at all. I'm so glad so many of you are one on the Elmo scale. That's really heartening to see.
A question on how many minutes we have to present when we
Have
get back?
Yes, Henry, about 10 minutes, and then you can come back and share.
I meant like how many minutes will each group have to share when we get back? When we reconvene?
We'll pick a few depending on the time, but about 1 or 2 minutes. Is that okay?
Yes, it is.
Great. Does everybody have access to the doc? No problem, Anamika. Please, not a problem at all. Somebody else can take the notes. Yeah, Mercy has also shared. Okay, Mercy, can we go into the breakout rooms? You were there, and I'm hoping you had some interesting conversations and got to know your peers from around the world. Can I request, as there were only 4 groups, I do think we can go around the room, and if one from each group could just quickly tell us about what you discussed, what stood out to you, what are the barriers that you discussed, and what you think is working in your context. Group 1, anybody?
I'm happy to talk for group one if everyone else is comfortable, but also feel free to jump in, please. But hi, everyone. My name is Rosti. And so we're really excited to be here. So we had a really interesting conversation where we talked about what currently works and where we are seeing barriers. I tried to take some notes in the Google Doc, but some of the things that one of our colleagues, Edward, was sharing for Uganda, he found that identification and group learning is something that's working really well for their context. And in Luminos's context, we found that phonics-based instruction and then focusing on building identity and self-belief also worked quite well. But there were also quite a few challenges that we talked about. So Archana told us about her context in India, I believe, where it was really difficult to find and provide modified TLMs in low learning context and low resource context. And that really resonated with me in particular, because one of the things Luminos has really been thinking through is how do we support children in low resource and low learning context, which is quite different to developed context. So we also find that resources are a challenge. It's difficult to find tools that can accurately identify children, just because a lot of the tools just from more developed countries don't work in our settings, and a lack of data, so a lack of an understanding of what the prevalence of the specific types of learning differences are is also quite challenging, because we don't really know how to position ourselves to support those children. Group one, anything else I missed, feel free to jump in.
Sorry, we also talked about the issue of as a challenge is the negative attitudes of most of the stakeholders when it comes to supporting children with learning differences. You find it coming from home up to the level of the learning environment at school and the other. And wherever there is negative attitudes, support becomes a bit minimal.
Thanks, Rasi. Thanks, Kyazze. That's really interesting. And I have a sense that there'll be very similar barriers that we may hear across the other groups as well. Group two, anybody would like to go ahead?
Yeah, hi, Tejaswini. I'm so sorry, group two, we were a bit lost. I think we just kind of discussed the challenges. So we have a whole list of challenges. I don't think any of us got the time to discuss what really works. So I'll request the group to come up with any points that they have now. So certain things that came up were like how the curriculum here, is like mostly textbook driven and how it's very exam focused, leaving very little space for differentiation. And how also, how it's difficult to align the expanded core curriculum to the national curriculum, leaving out children with disabilities with no choice but to go to special schools rather than mainstream schools. Then somebody also said about not a lot of time for teacher training and how teachers lack this knowledge about learning differences. And those who do have a knowledge about learning differences, it's usually single disability based. So children with complex disabilities again get left out. Then there was a very interesting, I think Anamika shared a very interesting model. I'll just ask her to unmute and share it here. Anamika, you want to go on about the mental health bit that you were sharing with us? About how teachers were burdened with a lot of administrative work and the kind of model that you were using. Is she there with us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
loud and clear.
Sorry. So yeah, thanks Abba for sharing that. And we means based on all the things that are happening around, what we did was we did a study for teachers also, and we believe that they are also burdened and they are also stressed. They are also having a mental health challenge or mental well-being challenge, and it is mainly because there's a lot of burden like administrative work that they have to do in the schools. For example, in government schools, they have to do for midday meals, they have to organize all the events, they have to always get the inspections done every now and then. Some of the official is visiting, so perhaps a lot of time goes into that, and then not only doing that and organizing but also documenting everything. So a lot of time goes into that rather than and that stresses them, and over and above, all the parents and everybody also want better results for their students. And so everything, again coming back to Sabha, what she said earlier, everything is textbook oriented, academic oriented. So it is nobody is looking at how the children are feeling, whether they are learning what they are for what they are in the school. So perhaps we did a study for teachers as well as the students and tried to think how we can develop a model around it. And we are trying to develop a PFA model for that. And we feel that the way that physical health checkups are done in the school for students, for all the students, so similar to that, mental health checkup should also be done and identified whatever challenges are there. Again, not making a norm that they need to go to a special school, forget that, for getting that special support or attention, that they should be part of the normal schools. Whether they are depressed, whether they are dyslexic, or they need any other support. Yeah, of course, counseling, etc. can help.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Anamika.
Anamika. Tejaswini, there was just one more interesting point that came up about how, when we are just starting on inclusion, how we are very happy with the numbers that we get. So we are stopping at the enrollment and not really looking at the engagement. And that's where, inclusive curriculum, a differentiated curriculum can actually help in improving learning outcomes. So that is all from room number 2. On to room number 3, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone from room number 3?
Nazia has taken the notes. Nazia, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I think I have mistakenly put all our things in room number 1. When I joined, I missed to see our number. Anyway, so the challenges actually which was identified by our team mostly, the identification of what is currently working. So our team members actually brainstormed and mostly come up with, everybody agreed that mostly that training and capacity building and awareness part are going on quite well. And also inclusion of technology. That actually really was interesting to know that has been working very well in some of the context. From the Malawi perspective, also the capacity building part and the training is going on very well. And one of the other key thing came out, that integration of universal design for learning. That was a very interesting thing to know, that this also has been working very well in a few of the context. And what we have identified in terms of the barriers, we really felt that one of the key barrier is the stereotyping. Most of the communities and actually the kind of marginal communities we work with, we actually find that there are lots of mindset issues among the communities about the inclusiveness and also with the issues of disability. Then everywhere policy gaps, from India to Africa, everywhere policy gaps is an issue. And it's not only about the policies, also about the implementation of those policies. So it's actually both sides. Then we also realized, which is quite similar to group number 2, that absence of inclusive curriculum and supervision is another area which is actually is very common globally. And then lastly, which came out strongly, that attitude by some teachers, assuming that integrated education is for special needs education teachers only. So please, other team members, please jump in and share if I have missed anything.
Thanks, Nadia. Anybody else from Team 3? And I'm really glad to see that you're able to share your challenges. And I'm really hoping that by the end of the session, some of these, you might have answers to some of these as we go along with our conversation today. Okay, the last group 4. Could we have someone please come and talk to us?
I think I was nominated for group 4. We talked about the things that were working were play-based learning, teacher training, providing free books for students to follow their interests. So they're reading stories that are interesting to them. Some of the challenges were high enrollment, access to digital tools, some slow-moving policies, and some mindset issues where not only officials, but also school-based folks were recognizing physical challenges, but not learning differences, not the ones that you cannot see. And so those were ours in group 4.
I think that's a great segue. I hope this has helped you and Kyazze sort of also think about your presentation in terms of these challenges. And over to you, Melissa, to tell us about CAST and about UDL.
Awesome, thank you. Just take a second to share my screen. Thank you for inviting me, everybody, to your community of practice. I had a lot of good conversations getting to know you. Okay, I think it's sharing now. So I am Melissa Sanjeh. I am from CAST. CAST is a nonprofit or non-governmental organization, and it's an education and learning science organization. And so our mission is that CAST leads, inspires, and convenes a global community to design equitable, inclusive learning experiences through our universal design for learning framework. So what we have done and how we work with people is we have reached 19,000 teachers in the 23-24 school year alone. And we have been in 21 countries and 42 states. We're working in play-based education, actually with Lego education. In Australia, we work individually with international schools across the globe. We also work with some local schools and government schools across the globe. And we did a lot of accessibility work in Europe and influenced their new Accessibility Act. So we've done a lot of work internationally. And through that process, we had 25,000 hours of learning about UDL and impacted about 340,000 students. I wanted to invite everybody, and I'll put this in the chat after towards the end so that you can have it again. But I wanted to invite everybody to our UDL Con International. You, of course, can come to DC, but there is a very robust virtual component of it, and there's a discount code that I'll put in the chat. We're also launching an international community of practice focused specifically on UDL, and we're going to launch that in October. So I'll also put in the chat our website, and you can sign up for a newsletter, and so you'll be able to get notified of that when we launch that. So I know some of you know about Universal Design for Learning. I want to do a little quick overview of what it is. I know many of you are already acquainted with it. But the definition we've been working with as a professional learning team most recently is that Universal Design for Learning is an educational framework that guides the development of flexible and accessible methods, materials, and environments that embrace variability, minimize barriers, and develop learner agency for all. And we'll go over each of those little bullet points in this very short presentation. And how we do that is we use the Universal Design for Learning guidelines. So those guidelines are also available on our website, and they're a tool that we use to support and scaffold the implementation of Universal Design for Learning. So we use those. There is a list of strategies, different things you can do when you're thinking about the main ways in which students vary. How can you address that, and how can you build in choice and flexibility in your curriculum? And in using that, we've learned through, because we also have a research arm of our organization, is that Universal Design for Learning improves academic achievement, learner engagement, and educator learning and development. And you'll be getting the slides as well. We'll be dropping those into the main slide deck that's sent out. And so you'll be able to follow that bit.ly and look at some more of the information about the research. So the 3 big ideas I mentioned, those 3 big bullets, and when we're thinking about implementing Universal Design for Learning, the first is we honor the learner variability, and we understand that it is the rule and not the exception. And so what we mean by that is every brain is different. This is a picture of the neural pathways of a brain. It is out of a project out of Harvard called the Connectome Project. And they set out to find what are the patterns and the ways that the brain's neural pathways are mapped. And what they found is there is no difference. There's no pattern. Everyone is different. So when you go to their website, you'll see all these beautiful pictures of these beautiful brains, because that's what came out of the project, because everybody's brain is different. And it's as unique as a fingerprint. And that makes a lot of sense, because our brains are mapped, our neural pathways are mapped by our experiences and our interactions between ourselves and the world. And of course, we know that no 2 humans have the same experience in the world. And so because of that, CAST looks at variability, how every brain is different, as not a problem to solve, but a strength to leverage. And we leverage that strength by using these UDL guidelines that are organized into 3 principles: how students engage into the learning, how they're taking in information, how they're understanding it, and turning it into usable knowledge, and how they're acting upon their understanding. And we use those guidelines to map multiple pathways to learning goals. Similar to when we're going to a place, we have multiple pathways to that destination. Some of us are going to take the fastest road. Some of us are going to take the shortest distance. Some of us are going to take a bicycle. Some of us are going to take a bus. Some of us are going to take a car. Some of us may walk. And so we do that with learning. We think about what is the goal that we want students to achieve, and what are the multiple ways that they can achieve that goal. And then again, we use these UDL guidelines to think about what are the multiple ways we can give them to engage in the learning. Where are the choices? How can I give them more than one way to take in the information, to comprehend it, to understand it? And how can I give them more than one way to act on their understanding? The second big concept in UDL is we turn our attention from barriers and learners to barriers and designs, barriers and lesson plans. So where are students getting stuck? We turn our attention to think about that. And the reason for that is kind of emulated by this cartoon or this comic or this illustration. It's a picture of a sunflower on the right that has a warm climate, lots of other flowers around it. And then on the left, there's a picture of a flower that has died, that has snow on it. It's in a very cold and inhospitable climate. And the quote says, "When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower." So we turn the attention to that lesson plan and we think about, where are students getting stuck? We don't say to ourselves, the student doesn't read, or the student can't read. We say to ourselves, reading is the only way to get the content, and that is the barrier. So we think about, where are the other ways that we can get content? Another way to look at it is this cartoon. On the left, we have everyone on the same box. It's a one size fits all. We might call that equality. But what we see is that one of those individuals cannot see over that fence. They cannot reach that goal. If we think about it as our learning goal, they cannot reach that goal of seeing that soccer game. So in the middle, we accommodate. We give people boxes so they can see over the fence, so they can reach that goal to see that soccer game. But in the UDL, what we try to do is we take down that barrier, we take down that fence, we remove as many problems as possible so that everyone can show up to the learning exactly how God made them and view the soccer game. And then we pile some of those boxes. Maybe we pile them in the side, because we're not going to take away accommodations. We're going to make them options. We're going to put them in the environment for students to use so they can use their agency to maybe pull it over and sit down, or maybe they want to stand on the box. And what we find when we do things like that is we have things that are necessary for one student, but end up being good for all. Similar to the way a curb cut is necessary for a person who's using a wheelchair. They need to have the curb cut down so they can go onto the street. It's also useful for someone using a bicycle. It's also useful for someone who's pulling luggage or pushing a child in a stroller or a pram. It's useful for those people. It's good for one, but it could be useful for all. And so when we think about learning, we think about those boxes, those accommodations. Those are useful for some of our learners. In fact, those are necessary for some of our learners. Somebody's going to need that box, but they're useful for all. Some other students might go use that box, and it makes the learning more accessible for them as well. And then the last core concept is the goal of UDL is learner agency. And so what do we mean by that? Learner agency is a learner that is purposeful and reflective, resourceful and authentic, and strategic and action oriented. So we give students choice in what they learn so that they can be purposeful. We give students choice in how they take in the information. Is it a book? Is it an audiobook? Is it a video? Is it a picture? So they can be resourceful, so they know what works for them, so they can be resourceful in their learning. And we give them an option of how they show us what they know, how they act on their learning, so that they can be strategic and action oriented. So I wanted to give you a little picture of what that might look like in practice. So this is a story of a kindergarten class that took place in New Hampshire, USA. And that was a retell lesson. So the lesson goal was, I can retell a story. And so the teacher gave the students 3 options. They could retell the story using these little popsicle puppets that you see on the screen. They could retell the story to a camera that was recording them on an iPad. They could retell the story to a camera on their own, or they could get together with a group of their friends and they could put together a little play, a theater production, to retell the story. She then gave them a piece of paper which had pictures of the different tools that they might need to do the choice that they chose. So if they chose the popsicle sticks, they were going to circle the popsicle sticks and the puppets and maybe some markers. And they had a little box where they could draw another tool if they thought they needed another tool. Now, these are young people, and so they all wanted to use scissors, whether they needed them or not, because they're six-year-olds, and 6-year-olds love cutting things. But they went about this project, and one of the young learners was on the carpet in the classroom, and they had the glue sticks out, and they had the popsicle sticks out, and they had the markers out, and everything was all over the carpet. It's kind of a mess. And a co-teacher walked in, another teacher walked into the classroom and said to the teacher, "Oh my gosh, are you okay with this?" And the teacher said, "You know what?" She was retelling the story to me. She said, "You know what, Melissa, I thought about it for a second, and I don't really think that way anymore. I don't think about our students compliant, our students in rows, our students facing forward. I think about what's going to help them get to the learning goal." And so through that, she felt a little bit more empowered to teach the way she wanted to teach in the process. So as I said in the very beginning, UDL not only gives those students some agency and how they complete things, but it also gives teachers some agency and how they can grow their practice. So that inclusive classroom, what it looked like, it was choice and learning, right? So they had a choice on how they demonstrated what they know. They had a choice in who they worked with, if they worked on their own or if they worked with a group. They had more than one way to understand the information, and they had more than one way to express what they knew. So some tips for assessment, and I know Kyazze is going to go into assessment more deeply and give you some more specifics, but just thinking about from a big picture UDL perspective, some tips we might give you is offer more than one way to understand what the assessment is asking. So maybe you have partners read the assessment to each other, maybe you have accompanying pictures, but have more than one way to understand that, and then offer more than one way for students to express what they know, whether it be drawing, writing, speaking. One other thing I just wanted to point you to is we have something called the school-wide implementation criteria. And so that is also on our website, and it talks about what does the school need to do to be accessible and provide agency for students all over the school, all in the places and spaces of the school, and their culture and their environment, in their teaching and learning and their lessons, and the way the leaders and the managers handle policy and professional learning. So I know my time is tight, so we might not have time to answer these questions, but I wanted to leave you with some reflection questions to sort of chew on, thinking about what is one way that you've changed the environment to increase access for learning differences, and what is one way that you've changed the environment to increase student agency, and what questions might you have? And I hadn't been looking at the chat, but let's see if there's any questions in the chat. Do you see any questions in the chat?
Not yet, Melissa, but I think after Kyazze is done talking, we can also do that. If you could also just drop the reflection questions in the chat, Melissa, and also the conference. So I think that would be useful if anybody wants to take a minute to answer any of the questions that Melissa just asked. Nicholas, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. What has come into my mind when you presented about the one person who didn't see the page, and then you lowered down the fence. I have a question. How can UDL strategies be applied to create a culture-responsive curriculum and assessment system that actively incorporates students' voice? I don't. Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah. So some people, when they look at that that fence picture, they take down the fence entirely because they and often they'll label that liberation, right? And so sometimes the way that we include students' voices through providing them with 3 or 4 choices, and other ways we sometimes will include students' voices, asking them ahead of time, how would you like to show me that you understand this content? So that's a way to include their voice. Another way is to ask them for feedback at the end of a lesson. Where did you get stuck? What was the barrier? And then use that information to design your lesson the next time to sort of figuratively take down more of that fence for them.
All right, thank you. I have another question. It might not be for you, but for almost all of us. How come students' voices are not heard, especially here in Uganda? Like, it's not hard. We just craft curriculum, we just do assessments without hearing them. But that's why they are stigmatized, they are stereotypes in the schools where we take them. I don't know, how do you do it that side? How do other countries do it? For us, we don't consider that. Students' voice, no way. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Nicholas. And I agree. I think a lot of countries, I'm sure, are facing the same problem. In that context, in the context of the question you just asked and what Melissa is asking, and flipping the question a little, are there actually cases where you have heard the student voices? And building up on what Melissa asked, what is the one way in which you have changed the environment to increase access? Or what is the one way you've tried to increase student agency? If any of you would like to come off mute and tell us about something you may have done in your respective context, I think that would be really useful for all of us.
Tejaswini, can I go?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I absolutely love the way you said that we need to change the environment because you really cannot fix the child. And I've seen teachers spending so much time in fixing children with neurodivergence. You have goals like increasing sitting tolerance and increasing eye contact. And we have often wondered, like, where is it that going to take you? Or, but then one way that what we have done is changing the learning environment is a very simple thing of visual schedules. Children have agency on what the day is going to look like. The day is structured. So that's like one example that we can give you from what we have done here. And just something so simple and yet so powerful, like accessible timetables. So the child knows where they have to go. We have seen a reduction in meltdowns because of this, and it's just worked so beautifully.
That's so great. Thank you for sharing, Sadaf.
Sorry,
Kyazze.
yes, sorry. I was just going to say thanks to my friend Simba for the question. But as we are now talking, it is something that we are also working to see that we improve. One of the things we have put up is making sure that learners with learning differences participate in the school leadership and they are part of the school leadership in the schools. And we've made that deliberately to see that the inclusive education champions in the schools are part of the prefectorial body to see that their voices starts to come out. But that's why we are bringing up the inclusive education champions in every school. And these are learners with disabilities. But also as we are doing like the barriers and facilitated assessment in the school, in the focused group discussion, we make sure learners with learning differences are fully represented in those focused discussion groups. And then the creation of the awareness at the parents' level. The voice of the child cannot come in when the child's confidence has not built from the level of the parents up to the level of the learner himself. And that's why we are crying and we are trying to make sure that we do inclusion to bring these learners to school, because education is one of the tools that can make any child's voice come out clearly. And without education, the voice will not come out. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyazze. And I think on that note, if you could just tell us about how you're implementing this in the classroom we're building tomorrow. You're on mute. Yeah. Please
Yeah,
go.
thanks very much. It's a wonderful opportunity to share the experience of building tomorrow, but it's not an easy time after Melissa presenting with a very wonderful presentation on the UDL. Thanks to Melissa for the wonderful presentation. Edward Kyazze is my name. I work with Building Tomorrow as an organization. We are a non-government organization that is based in Uganda, which was founded in 2006. It's now around coming to 20 years. And our vision is literacy and numeracy for all children. And we are an organization that is working towards community-powered learning. In this regard, I would just want to ask the members, since they have gone through the UDL, just maybe by putting in the chat, what is your perspective that you understand when we talk about an inclusive curriculum? So in your own words, you could put that in the chat and just give us a highlight of what you think an inclusive curriculum and an inclusive curriculum assessment would look like if it is something that is to be inclusive. So we would look at those key highlights that the teams have put in the chat. And then we would look at maybe if we could look there, if anyone has already typed in. Someone is saying we have also built in time in school calendars. Okay, just that. Maybe that was for any. What is an inclusive curriculum to you colleagues? You could type in and we see what you say in this regard. Okay. As the members are typing into their chats, yes, someone is talking about aligning to the needs of the learners. Thank you, Innocent. That's about the aligning to the needs of the learners. And many others would be posting, but would want, because of time, people could continue posting their definition or what they think an inclusive curriculum look like as we continue to interact in this regard. So my colleague Melissa presented something almost similar to this, but let's now focus on pictorial number 3, where we're talking about that when it comes to inclusion, when we talk of an inclusive curriculum, it just shows us that we don't need to change the learner, but we need to change the learning environment. And the learning environment, in many cases, people perceive it to be the school learning environment. But the learning environment begins with the homes where these children are, because children begin learning from home level. So they need to make sure that the home of where these children with learning differences come from also give freedom for the learners to be able to tame the environment before they tame the school learning environment. That's very critical in that. So as we are asking ourselves, an inclusive curriculum would be a universal and it intends to improve the experience and the skills and making sure that you attain all the learners, including those with different protected characteristics, like the different learners people have been talking about in the different presentation and the study, children with intellectual, with dyslexia, and many others. So as Building Tomorrow, we are saying one of the key teaching techniques in making sure that you ensure for this is access to all. You need to consider that education must be accessed to all, but not only to the few or to those children with learning differences to be only in their learning spaces. Then the community support, they need to make sure that the community comes together and they support the learning, and then includes the universal design techniques that have been purely discussed and presented very well by Melissa. But here I would want to emphasize on one of those techniques about making sure that these children belong. It's very critical that you make sure that children belong. When a child comes to school, until the child feels that, yes, I belong here. Even as in any forum, when you go in any meeting, the first few minutes, I could say, some others could even take an hour before someone says, I think I belong here and I'm part of this. So that belonging is a very critical component in making sure. Then cultural responses, like the books and the materials that reflects the identity of the learners. That's why Melissa was talking about making sure you use pictorials, using that things that the learner reflects and looks at and sees that it is in his own level, but also co-creating the classroom rules. When you talk of co-creation, is making sure that you don't keep the rules to be static. They should be dynamic changing, whether it requires learners to sit on the floor, whether it requires learners to change the desks. You need to change the environment that you don't get rid. Encourage the voices and choices in the classroom decisions. So when a learner says, teacher, me, I want to sit with so, don't say, no, you are not going to sit there. So those are very critical things when it comes to inclusive curriculum. The sitting, the group work, the topics of interest. You don't just take the child and say, for you are going to be on this topic. It is the learner to say, teacher, for me, I want this. I want to go for this exercise. So that is very critical as we are talking about an inclusive curriculum. Then form school and community-based CoPs. The need for making sure that the voices of the learner are heard by forming the school-based CoPs. Here we are looking at people who come together at school and talk about issues of inclusion. And in case there are challenges and barriers, they discuss about those barriers and they work towards seeing that they change the learning environment. Then the mobilization of the parents and stakeholders to form community education teams. This is very critical because parents must be involved in the learning processes. We have very many colleagues in different spaces who are training children with different learning differences in a special learning environment. And this makes the learner to get so much attached to the teacher. And at the time you want the learner to go back home, the learner says, for me, I'm staying with the teacher. So these are very critical things that we need to think about wherever we are talking about inclusive education. And then holding meetings to advocate for the assistive devices to support the learners, and then differentiated instructions. So in the differentiated instructions, we need to look at the content that you want to pass on to this particular learner, the process, and then the product you want to see. So you need to look at the content in terms of the knowledge and the skills the learner needs to master. Then you look at the activities that particular learner need to master in the content. And then you look at the methodologies. That's why our colleague was talking about writing, pictures, and all that, different methodologies. So that will be very critical. In this case, when we are talking about differentiated teaching and learning, if, for example, you're looking at learners and you're teaching learners letter B, a learner with learning differences, how can you differentiate? You look at the learners with visual impairment, learners with intellectual impairment, and then bring all of them on board. But at this moment, I would also want to say, in case there are other, in the chat, you could share your what you are facing in your particular environment as regards to the inclusive learning environment. It's something that you could share within the chat, and what has your experiences in the school learning environment that we've been in that process. So as colleagues are sharing, maybe they are putting up their highlights. Okay, maybe someone was talking, okay, maybe that was at that time, large size, lack of resources to support, and many other issues that the teams are presenting. So in this regard, we could talk about curriculum adaptation and modification. For inclusive curriculum to take place, you need to look at the environment, you need to look at the strategies that you are using, the support materials, the level of support. By all means, that means the manpower, the technology, and then in the assessment. Then you need to look at facilitating the teaching and learning processes simply and reduce the content. You don't need to give the learner the content that is designed in the curriculum, but you can break it into smaller parts. Children with learning differences do not feel excluded in the learning environment, so that by making sure that you divide the learning, you can look at alternations like the sitting the child in front of the learning environment or the class, content of the classwork, content of the examination as such as multiple choices. You could look at examination, reading of the question paper, allowing either children to look at issues of error, instructional strategies, and learning materials. These are very critical ways that make sure when it comes to children with cognitive and intellectual learning differences, you'd look at the sitting and distraction-free learning environment, reading handouts, short sentences and simple vocabularies. You need to look at allow the use of technology for the learner to be able to learn. Then the flexibility in making sure captioning of videos that could make sure that these learners will be able to learn. These are some of the other key. I will not talk about the physical impairment, but I will go with for learners with visual impairment. If you have a learner, they need to provide magnifying glasses with the light, increase of the font size of the smart board while teaching, provide oral information, grant extra time to complete the work. This can be done within the same learning environment where learners without the learning differences are with the learners with the learning differences. So we are talking about learners with and learners without learning differences in that context. So then sit away from the window to avoid the glance or distractions for this learner. And in this case now, I just want to go briefly on the issue of assessment and the strategies. So in our context in Uganda here, we are using a number of tools, but I could just touch on the screening and the mapping of these children in the learning environment. This is one of the tools that we do use. You have to go to the community, bring the name of the child, the age and all that, the caregiver, but you also look at, you may not fully say that this child has this learning difference, but you need to identify at that level, there is no problem whether the person has any challenge in making sure that you contextualize the child in the real impairment or the challenge that the child have. But that is at a level of mapping and identification. So we use those tools at the community level and at school level so that we can assess those learners, and then we administer other important tools. One of the other tools that we now administer the child to is the barriers, is the Washington Group Questionnaire. In this particular questionnaire, you have to profile the child, the name of the place, the interviewer, the translator, the caregiver, the name of the child, and all that background information. But this is the child functioning module, which is a tool that has always been used by many people in different countries. It is a universal tool that it can help support on identifying the learning difficulties that are within these learners. You'd look at these questions. I'll be showing you. Maybe I could first go back into the presentation and I highlight on that particular context, and we see when it comes to those learners, how do we contextualize them? It's very critical that we support these learners in their learning differences. So, colleagues, when I look at this particular tool, it has questions that will guide you on how to assess the child. When you're assessing the child, you'll have to administer this tool not only to the child, but to the caregiver too, because some of these questions are not, they are not to the age of the child. It may require you to ask the guardian or the parent. When you say, for example, you'd like to say, I would like to ask you some of these questions about the difficulties that Stephen may be having. And does Stephen have to wear glasses or contact lenses? And if the person says yes, and then you'd continue to question number 2 and say, when when wearing his or her glasses or contact glasses, does Stephen have difficulty in seeing? And at this level, when the parent says, yes, difficulties, you qualify the question, you say, would you say he has some not difficulty, or some difficulty, or a lot of difficulty, or cannot do at all? And at that level, it is until we go to 3 and 4. It is only 3 and 4 where we shall try to connect and say, maybe this child has these learning difficulties. Why are we not saying the no difficulty and some difficulty? We believe everybody has a difficulty. Every human being has a difficulty of a certain nature that may not necessarily be that difficulty that can affect the person to be able to learn. So that is the very critical part, I would say, that so as I conclude, I just want to go back and complete the, sorry, sorry for that. Let me just go back and look at the presentation and share the sorry, colleagues, as I was just sharing the tool, I moved up the presentation, but let me just share back and we can be able to look at the last part of the presentation in this regard. So we're looking at, yes. Sorry, sorry, colleagues. I just dropped off and
Kyazze, I actually also have the presentation you shared. Would you like me to pull it up?
yes, please, you could do that. You could do that.
The same one, yeah. Please let me know which
Just
slide you.
those next slides after the tools. Okay, but
Yeah.
there were just one tool I wanted to talk about. I'd wanted to talk about the barriers and facilitator assessment tool. It's a very critical tool that the team needed to know. If possible, you could open it, and then we briefly highlight. So this is another critical tool that we use to make sure, because we talked about the learning environment, and this is the tool that you do capture in this particular context. Sorry, is it?
I don't have access to it, Kyazze. Would you maybe want to
Okay.
drop the link in the chat and just talk through it for now in the interest of time? Is that okay?
Sorry, let me see if I can be able to open it from here.
Sure. And in the meantime, while Kyazze pulls it up, Melissa, there was a question about large class sizes, and I think that's relevant for both you and Kyazze. And there was also a question on how the Washington Group questionnaire is being contextualized to the Building Tomorrow context. So, Melissa, if you would just want to answer on the large class sizes, because I know that's a challenge that everybody in the low and middle income countries struggles with.
So I know sometimes it can be a struggle to do so many choices in a large class, in particular if the classroom is confining, it's small, there's not a lot of spaces to spread out. What we try to do is give choice where it's possible. So maybe it's a choice of partner, because that still engages a certain part of the brain that helps you to record the information in a way that's long lasting. Maybe a choice of a topic. We also encourage teachers to find 2 or 3 UDL things that they always do, and that can also provide more access. You always give the student an opportunity to talk to a neighbor or to write down their answer. You always give a student an opportunity to work in a group or to work alone. Those are like some small choices that you can give in the confines of a large class, but it also helps to open access to the curriculum for students and gives them agency because they're making some choices.
Thanks, Melissa. If there are any more questions for Melissa And Kyazze, if you have that up, we can probably show that now. Okay, that's not a problem. I do know it's an important tool, so we'll make sure we show it to you before we go out. In the meantime, as a part of our next exercise, there was also, in case there are any more questions that you have that you would want to ask, please do raise your hand and you can ask or drop it in the chat. Based on everything that you've heard today from Melissa and Kyazze, and we did take your feedback again on the previous sessions to hopefully give you something that is more implementable in your classrooms as well. For the next peer learning discussion, we are hoping it's something called the Monday and Someday exercise that Melissa actually told us about. And I'm just going to pull up my screen. Yeah. So in groups of 4 and 5, again, this will not be the same groups, I think. If you could just discuss from what you have learned today from these 2 presentations, what do you think you can do on Monday and what do you think you can do someday? Monday, meaning what you can go and implement immediately. Are there strategies that you learned in the last 30 minutes that you think you can go and implement in your classrooms tomorrow? And what is it that you think will take more planning and will need a longer term vision, but it is something that you are looking forward to implement in your classrooms? It's the same Google Doc. I will request Mercy to drop it in again. Please find your group number. I will also drop this question in the chat. Please find your group numbers for those of you who were struggling the last time. There are groups 1 to 10. So please find your respective group number and then fill in your Monday and Someday where you can. You have about 10 minutes and then we can, depending on how much time we have, we can come and share that. Oh, just a second, sorry. Kyazze, do you want to, if it's open, do you want to talk about it now or after the peer learning?
Can I talk about it now or we first go for the breakout? Okay.
Please go ahead and finish that.
Sorry for that, colleagues. I was just talking about the barriers and facilitators assessment tool. Hopefully we can be able to see the screen. This is a tool that we developed to support us to look at the different barriers in the learning environment. We look at the physical barriers, and it's a tool that has a clear score. It looks at the physical accessibility of the different barriers in the environment. Then the pedagogical barriers. The pedagogical barriers are barriers that are within the teaching and learning environment, the teaching methodology, the teachers themselves, whether they have the skills that it requires to support the child, and then the other general barriers, which would look at the classroom environment and the many other materials that are being used. And this tool of the barriers and facilitator assessment tool, we look at each particular school and we do a focus discussion with the stakeholders in the school to, first of all, take them through to say, if this school is to be an inclusive school, what are some of the things that you see in this school that it requires to be improved? If we were to have learners with learning differences in this school, what are those things that you think can hinder these learners? And after looking at them, you do a walk around the entire school, talking with the team and discussing, and afterwards you come and converge and then start to score. And you say, if you are to score yourself, availability of class teaching assistants for children with learning differences in the classroom, where would you score yourself as a school? So they would score themselves, and this tool has a score where we could be able to know after they have scored. For example, let me just do a sample. If I could do, yes, wonderful. If I could just score here and say a 2, a 3, and a 2, I put a 1. Because its highest score is at 3. And then let me go to the pedagogical. I also score, just giving an example in this tool. But that should be through a discussion after looking at many factors in the school with the team. And after you scored, let me go for the others. I'll also score, let me say 2. I give a 2. I give a 2 according to their response and a 2. So when we go to the score analysis, we shall find that the score is telling us the barriers that are existing in the school. And it will tell you, but now here, they are already showing the colors for this, depending on the score. For example, if I had scored, let me say a 0, I give a 0, you'd find that the score is really showing in red that there is very high barriers in the school. So the colors will keep on changing, and the analysis will tell you that when it comes to access, it is really very bad. There are many barriers in this particular case. So this tool helps us to every school where we work with to do an assessment and then talk with the stakeholders to see how we can work out to improve the learning environment in those schools. So I know inclusive education and inclusive curriculum is a process. It's not a one-day thing. So people need to know that as we are doing this, we shall need to take some good time as we always do it. So that is what I wanted to share with the team in terms of the barriers and facilitators assessment tool.
Kyazze, this was really useful. And now for the Monday and Sunday exercise, you have another tool that can go into your Monday or Sunday. If you have any questions, please do drop it in. If there are any clarifications regarding these tools as well, please do drop it into the chat. I will ask Mercy to quickly send you into the breakout groups.
Yeah.
Have 4 minutes, but I really do want to know from 1 or 2 groups that the quick wins, I'm sure you all discussed about the Mondays, which I'm sure you can go back and implement immediately. What we are interested to know as a community and as GSF is what is it that you spoke about something that you can implement someday, and what kind of support do you need to implement someday? If somebody wants to unmute and speak, please go ahead. If others would like to drop it in the chat, that would work as well. Just tell us your some days and what support do you need to implement those some days. Anybody from any of the groups who would like to share?
Yeah, I will start with one point. Something we can, I can do someday is empower student leadership. In this, I can create a framework for sustainable student involvement, such as student-led curriculum, committees, and regular feedback from the children. This will bring out the voices of all children. Yeah.
Thanks, Simba. Rosalind, you came off mute, I think. Do you want to? Okay, it was just a mistake. Anybody else who would like to discuss? And also, please do tell us what kind of support would you need? Is it tools? Is it case studies? Is it evidence hub? Is it more pilots? What is it that would be useful?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Innocent, please go ahead.
All right. So in our group, we discussed a few things that we need to start immediately, share the presentations, and also think about what is needed to modify the things rather than sharing it down. And then also what we can do someday, long-term plan, we're looking at the barriers and facilitator assessment too. I think this is the first time we saw it, so it'll be good if we can have it. And then also the element of communities of practice to encourage those, I think immediately, but also in the long term to ensure that it's embedded in the system as a policy.
Thank you, Innocent. We are at 1 minute. I know that you had questions for Building Tomorrow as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to request the team to answer it, and I will share it with you along with the takeaways email. I have just launched the poll. If you could take a quick minute to fill it. because we do take your feedback seriously. And I'm hoping this session was useful. Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you so much, Kyazze. And I hope all of you are able to change your barriers or break them down entirely. I hope this has been super useful for you all. And I will see you in the next session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.